Okay, so let's start. Uh, we'll start with the Hibernate mapping. I'll show you one-to-one mapping today.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we really use Hibernate in this microservices and REST implementation?
Yes. Otherwise, how will you implement the mapping between different tables? So today I'll show you, if I have got multiple tables, how do we interlink? How shall we interlink them? Right.
Okay.
So
Okay.
basically,
So
yeah,
that is the only way we can do. Any other options we have?
we have, Hibernate works with JPA only. So I'll show you today one-to-one unidirectional mapping, which you can only do with the help of Hibernate. But yes, without Java Persistence API, the entire relationship between tables, as far as database connectivity is concerned, that will never work.
This is related to only database, right? If we want to do something like REST to XML, XML to JSON, something like that, that should be different, right?
That's completely different. For that, Spring has all the annotations. For that, Hibernate is not required. Hibernate is only required for the mapping between tables, unidirectional, bidirectional mapping. Okay. So as we have discussed, ultimately we'll be using this Spring REST controller to process all the HTTP requests, JPA to deal with the database, and today we'll see how Hibernate one-to-one association or mapping exists between, unidirectional mapping exists between different tables, data model, different repositories. Okay, so we'll create a project for the same. So I'll go to this and we'll name it as, let's say, unidirectional or one-to-one mapping between tables or between associated tables, and without Spring JPA this cannot happen. So Spring JPA one-to-one, unidirectional mapping, Spring JPA one-to-one, Spring JPA one-to-one, or I could name it as, Spring JPA one-to-one unidirectional mapping. So COM example is fine. Demo project for Spring Boot JPA Hibernate. Packaging is fine, jar is fine, Java 17 is fine. For annotations I need web. For MySQL or H2 we need to load a particular driver, and for JPA, without this communication cannot exist with the database, right? Okay, and Hibernate mapping, Hibernate annotations will come with JPA itself, Java Persistence API. So I have generated a project, right, and it has downloaded it. So I will just unzip the project and open it as part of IntelliJ. Again I will create two model classes, one controller, exception classes, and service class and repository. So this project is created. I will just open it. I will name it as open, and I will name it as the name I have is this one, Spring JPA one-to-one unidirectional mapping. I said OK, and the project has come, pod XML file with 4 dependency and 1 build plugin. That is fine. Spring Boot starter parent version, 3.4 is also fine. I'll just close this other IntelliJ project, those are not required, so I'll close them. I needed the application properties file. I'll just copy it. The project has come up. Right. So I'll just change my application properties and I will mention the configurations. So the URL to connect with the database, this time let's say one-to-one mapping between tutorial and tutorial detail table. So let's say the name of a database is tutorial detail, or I could name it as Hibernate mapping. We'll use it the same for one-to-one mapping, and one-to-many, many-to-one, all those mappings will use the same database. Hibernate map is the name of a database, let's say. This is my username, my password, 7085. DDL auto means entity classes. Our job is to create the entity classes. Rest all will be taken care by the table creation. The table creation will be managed by the Hibernate. Show SQL, format SQL, generate DTL. So in pom.xml I have got 4 dependencies. Spring Boot starter data JPA, web, MySQL. That's enough for the dependencies are good as of now. I'll just create a package and we'll start with the model or entity classes. We are going to deal with the class called tutorial. This is going to be our first model class, and in the database this should be created automatically. DDL auto will create that. So entity and table, and the name of a table is going to say tutorials, not tutorial. This is going to be the name of the table, right? Primary key long, ID, generated value, strategy, generation type, identity. This is generated value. This is to make sure a unique ID is created automatically. Unique ID to be created automatically. Unique ID to be created automatically by the Hibernate framework. Our job is to annotate it with the ID. Then with tutorial I am going to introduce 3 columns. One, title as the name of a column. I can mention the name of a column as title, and then I have the description. Again, the name of a column could be same description, or if you want we can give another name also. Then whether that particular tutorial is actually published or not. So there is a boolean value published and column name published. So 3 columns: title, description and published, with ID in the tutorial table. right? I can add Lombok for for parameterized constructor, for getter setter methods, or we can create a constructor and getter setter by ourselves. So generate constructor without selecting any field, one empty constructor, right? Another generate all arguments, or I just need title, description and published. I selected them by pressing the control key, and the constructor is created for us by IntelliJ IDE, integrated development environment. And then getter setter method for all four fields: ID, title, description and published. Now when I print the object of tutorial, I want the object to be printed in a specific way. For that, object class has got one toString method. So I want that toString method also to be there, which will print a tutorial object like this: toString wait notify all, and equals hashcode. These are object class method. Object is the parent class of all Java APIs, so these kinds of method we can write in any class. Getter setter constructor to initialize the bean, right? This is tutorial, this is one table, and the mapping, Hibernate mapping, will exist with another table called tutorial details. Now this is also a table which will be created automatically, and the name of a table is going to be tutorial underscore details. Tutorial underscore details. In this tutorial table has got ID, name, ID, type, title, description and published flag. Here we will have the ID. Here we will have when the tutorial actually got created. So Java S or Java util date is fine, and the name of a flag is created on. A column will be created with the name created underscore on. The capital letter Hibernate brings a underscore there. We just need to give a capital letter, and Hibernate understands by itself that we want, like in this case I want created underscore by. So here we have the ID tutorial detail, we have created on, created by, and now the mapping. For why we are talking about this, this Hibernate one-to-one unidirectional mapping. So I'll just use the model class tutorial and I'll create its object. So what we actually want is, what we want to achieve is, so there should be one tutorials table, and there should be another tutorial underscore details table. That is our objective. And there should be mapping. So tutorial will have the title, will have the description, and will have the title, description and published flag, true and false. Tutorial details also has ID. Tutorial details will have created on and created by, but tutorial will also have tutorial underscore ID table, tutorial underscore ID column. So to create this column, to actually create a mapping between these two tables, this ID, this very ID, this very ID will come here to establish the mapping. To create that, we use one-to-one mapping from Jakarta package, one-to-one. Now fetch type, there are two options. One is eager, another is lazy. Lazy is when needed, only then database request should be published. Otherwise we don't have to create a connection and fetch data from tutorial table in tutorial details table every time. We don't need to do that. So lazy does not make a request every time. Maps ID, this is also another Jakarta JPA annotation which will map the ID, and with join column I'll mention the name of a column. For one-to-one mapping we have to understand these three annotations. Now fourth column in tutorial detail table will be created by this name. So for one-to-one mapping, all we need is one-to-one with fetch type lazy, maps ID, and join column mentioning the name of a column. With this, one-to-one mapping will automatically work. And to create a bean, we need to create two constructors, right? Actually I need to create the data, so I am creating a parameterized constructor. Because I am creating a parameterized constructor, and for bean to be created it needs one no argument constructor also. Java has a basic rule: if you don't give any constructor, default constructor is already there. But since I am creating a parameterized constructor, so I have to create, remember that we have to create a no argument constructor, otherwise the beans will not be created, project will not start. Getter setter methods for created on, created by, and the tutorial get tutorial and set tutorial also. I need these three getter setters also. So two model classes and relationship will exist, right? For a smooth working of these two these two mapping, we can add one more annotation here. For smooth working of these two linked classes, JSON ignore properties, we can give the Hibernate lazy initializer. I'll tell you while running this project, its importance. Hibernate H small capital I capital initializer. Hibernate L capital INI initializer, right? So model classes are done. Now quickly we should create a repository for communication between database and the model classes. For that I will create one more package with the name repository. A repository will have two classes or two interfaces rather. I told you that tutorial repository, right? All we need to do is put repository annotation on top. This is interface. There is already one interface created by Spring Framework called as JPA repository or CRUD repository, right? Where we need to mention the name of a table, tutorial, and the primary key, right? And default methods, for example, find by ID, save, remove, set method, all default methods exist. But I want to show you two methods. For that, query will be automatically created, but I have to write the name of a method very carefully, right? I have to write the name of a method very carefully. For example, I want to create, I want Hibernate to create a query by the published flag. So find by published, and I will give a true value or a false value. and I will use this method in service class, and service will be used in controller class, where we will actually see the operation of this mapping using Postman or Thunderbird client. So one is via published flag, and one is via in tutorial detail table. When I will try to delete something, I should find by tutorial containing that whether that tutorial exists or not. So I will just give a title, and it should tell me that tutorial entry exists or not. So these two queries, if I misspell them, query will not be created, and if once query does not created properly, it won't work. Contains method exists with collections, so find by tutorial containing, right? This is one repository which I will use in service class. Now there is one-to-one mapping, so I will create one more class called tutorial, one more interface called tutorial details repository. Now my point is, first of all, this is mandatory. Becoming a child of CRUD or JPA repository is mandatory, otherwise, and mentioning the name of a model class, tutorial details, and mentioning the data type of the primary key, this. Now I will use one more annotation here called as transactional. Basically, if something wrongs in between while I try to delete by ID, then I want the entire operation to stop, because tutorial table has a primary key called ID, and tutorial detail table will have tutorial ID. So if things go wrong anywhere, the entire process will be rolled back using add transactional annotation. So delete by tutorial ID and delete by ID, and I will pass the spelling has to be correct, otherwise query won't be created, and then the service won't work, and ultimately controller won't work. So this is the two repository. Now coming back to the, if I skip the service, if I skip the, I can have service class, but just to show you the Hibernate mapping, I can directly create controller. Controller can also call the repository. So my first controller will be tutorial controller. So here we will create first Java class called tutorial controller. Now for this to work, for all REST API, REST controller annotation, right? And default mapping, which will work for all operations: get, put, post, delete, patch, request mapping. By default, I want things to start with APA. If you learn, the front end part, to allow all APIs to access our REST API, we use cross origin, right? Now using dependency injection, I will use my repository called tutorial repository. Here I will need the tutorial details repository also, but I will create its object later on. So dependency injection, I have the repository with me. So first thing, we'll try to add the data in the database. To add the data in the database, we have post mapping, and I need to give the HTTP endpoint via which this method will be recognized. And during the operation of Spring Framework, I explained how all these objects are being managed by Spring Context Object. Now curly braces means path variable will be used. So first, via post mapping, I need the entry to be created, in the tutorial. I need the entry to be created first in the tutorial table. So I'll not use path variable right now. I will directly post it under API. We will have directly tutorials. So public, I will return the status code 201 for posting mapping. So response entity, response entity, and our object is tutorial. ToString method is already created. So when I will return, I will get exactly in the same format what we have mentioned in the ToString method. The name of a method can be create tutorial, and here while posting I need the entire JSON to be given. So via request body, right, I can give tutorial object name like this, create tutorial object name is, and repository already has save method. So I will just give from this tutorial object, I can create a new object, or I could have used the same object. From this method parameter, whatever I will give as part of a JSON, I will get from it. For example, I'll get the title, constructor is already there, then I will get the description, and then I will get the published flag. We have the published getter setter method, we didn't create it. So in the tutorial, this boolean flag, it is published or set published. So I have is published. Okay, whatever we pass as part of postman body, as part of a JSON, that will go, and we'll fetch it and we'll save it. Now all I need is return the object on the, via postman. I want to see what got added in the database, so I'll just return it with HTTP status created, which is 201. HTTP status will also do exception handling here, but this is post mapping, how we want data to be posted. Now we should verify whether tables are created in the database or not, and whether posting is actually working fine or not. Then we'll write it for get mapping, get by ID, get all, put, delete by ID also. So to run this clean, and I should show you the two tables linked with each other with the help of ID. Tutorial will have ID, title, description, published. Tutorial detail will have created on, created by, and tutorial ID. Right, database name I have already given. So now while I install it, a jar file will be created, target folder will be created here, and table will already be created once the jar gets created. Right, I'll just copy this. Once this is over, I will run this command, use this database, and then show all tables. And if tables are created successfully, then I will run this command, show me what is in the tutorials table. And if tables are successfully created, I will run this command also. I remember what we have given in the model classes. First table name is, there is an error here. So a jar might not get created. There is an error in the no, there is no error. So tutorials is first table name and second table name is tutorial details, right? So it would show us, yeah, so it has created tutorial details with a primary key of tutorial ID, and it has also created tutorial table. This is because of show SQL, and it has added the foreign key constraint. So one-to-one maps ID and join column, they have played their roles, but here is condition evaluation report. There is something wrong, I think. Conditional classes, there is some exception. Error creating with the bean name tutorial repository. Could not create a query for find by tutorial containing, failed to create. Found no property tutorial found further. So I again misspelled in the tutorial repository find by title. In the tutorial table there is no tutorial. In tutorial table there is title, description and published. So I should have written this. So one spelling mistake and the build got failed, right? So these names should match in the classes basically, right? If this works on the postman, I will have the entries for title, description and publish to be created. So queries created. Over the period of time, when you see the logs, you'll get to know what happened. So jar file is created, target folder is created, and once it is done with this name, a jar file will come here. Here you can see it has come, and in the meantime I'll start my project also with Spring Boot run. But let me show you that this database exists now. I could have run show databases also, and if I check, these two tables should be created by now, tutorial and tutorial details. So under tutorials table you have the description, published, flag and title, and in details you have created on, created by and tutorial ID. Yeah, so this mapping works. So once it runs, I have my up and on port number 7085, API 7085 API tutorials. I remember the HTTP endpoints we have given. So again I can confirm from the controller class that it is API, and under API you have tutorials, right? Used add request body as a method parameter, so I have to give a body, right? So body first is title, so I'm going to name it as Hibernate one-to-one mapping. unidirectional mapping. Which is not possible without JPA. Then we have description. Hibernate works in collaboration with JPA. And the last is published feature, which has got a boolean value, whether that title is actually published or not. So I do this, right? So when I post it, I should get the entire object back and I should get 201 created. I got the entire object with 201 in the database. You will now see an exact entry for tutorial. Currently we have not inserted anything in tutorial details, right? So that is empty, but the posting is working fine. So we'll have to first finish the post mapping for tutorials, and then we'll finish the mappings for tutorial details. Okay, so this is post mapping. Now to get everything back, so under API I'm going to use the same endpoint for get, but what I want is the entire list. While get, now this is the same syntax that we use every time, list of all entity. I know my model, which is tutorial, so that is what our expectation is, list of all tutorials back. Name of a method will be get all tutorials back. And here if I want I can give title also. So for request mapping, $title, but I'll use for request param, I'll use required feature false, that it is not mandatory that you have to search something by title. If you want to search, it's fine, you can. So that is the case. If you want to search a particular tutorial by title, because I have written a method properly. So first I am saying if title is not there as part of a request, if title comes out to be null, then my repository has got a different method, find all. Now with method reference, all we need to do is we need to create a list first, list of all tutorials. Object will be tutorials. New array list, right? Find all for each. Using method reference, this object is called the collection add method. Collection has got add all, all those methods. But if you have given a title with the help of find all, for that we have specially written one special method called find by title containing. For that, query is already created. I will just pass the title, and to show the output we'll use this method for each, and we'll put entire data in our object called tutorials. Using method reference, we'll add it, right? Right, so whatever the case, either tutorial is empty or title is empty, then everything otherwise with title containing. Now what if there is nothing we found in the database? So I could check my list. If my list is empty, I'll return 204, no content. Return new response entity with HTTP status, no content. If it is not empty, that means I've got data. So return new response entity, the tutorial list with with OK 200, HTTP status OK. Right, this is for get all with title or without title. Right, then what if somebody wants by tutorial ID? These scenarios are common across projects. So I will have similar endpoint, but for tutorial by ID we always used path variable, curly braces. So this time also I will use response entity, but not list, just one object, tutorial back, and the name of a method will be get tutorial by ID. Path variable, we will give a ID, data type is long. Now all this we don't have to check. We created a list, we checked whether the front end is looking for a title or not. All that we don't have to do. So all we need is this. We have to search. Find by ID method already exists as part of CRUD repository or JPA repository. So I'll just call my method find by ID, and I will give my ID. Now comes exception handling. What if that does not exist? So I could create one exception with the name, create one exception class with the name resource not found exception with no tutorial found with the ID. So no new resource not found exception. Right, I'll create this exception class and I will write here, so that proper message comes that no tutorial found with ID, and I will print the name of ID here. Now I'm getting this exception because this class does not exist, so I'll immediately create one more package with the name exceptions. Under exception I will create one more class with the name resource not found exception. Now to create exception, it's a general phenomena. Either you become a child of exception and you create a public constructor with a message. The parent exception class will help you print that. With the help of super you can print that. And if you want to serialize data, all you do is add the private static final long serial version ID 1 for serial local encryption, local securing the data for whenever this exception comes, right? Because we are passing the ID. Now if this exception comes, somebody has to catch it. Now either I can catch it or I can propagate it. Now here I can propagate it, or here if I mention this as a runtime exception, right? And here now run means unchecked exception. It will be handled automatically by JVM, right? So now if we find otherwise exception comes, we will come to the next line only when we have the tutorial object with us and with the HTTP status 200. Okay, this is get by ID. I need to write 3 methods or 4 more methods. One is put mapping, one is delete, one is get by published also. So I'll use put mapping. Under tutorials we are using another path variable, put mapping public response entity. and object name is tutorial. Update tutorial, name of a method, because we have to update it. So again I will have to update by passing the ID, and I have to pass the entire JSON. So request body tutorial and the name of the object. So now I'll first do the same thing again. What if we don't get it? So we'll come to the next line, only we have got it. Now in this object, after getting it, I'll update my title, description and the published flag. So I'll update from the method parameter. I'll get the title. Similarly, I'll get the description from the method parameter. Similarly, I'll get the published flag from the method parameter. And once updation is done, I will simply call save method, right, and I will give the HTTP status code 200 OK. So here we have the repository, and I will call save, and I will save this object. It will be updated. This is put mapping. First we found out if there is problem, exception will be thrown, right? I'm not completed the exception handling part right now. So this is update put mapping. Now we will have delete mapping, and in the end we will have one more get mapping. So one delete mapping the entire table. This this is used very carefully. Tutorials, entire thing. So public response entity, when we delete the entire thing, we just give the HTTP status back. Name of a method will be delete all tutorials. So all we do is, there is a method called delete all, and once everything is deleted, then just we return 204 no content after we delete everything. This we actually don't tell, this we don't give the access to everyone, because this can harm the entire database. What if somebody wants to delete by ID? This is a normal thing. So get by ID or delete by ID, we always use path variable. So I'll just copy this, and I will name the method as delete tutorial by ID, and via path variable we'll get the ID. And of course first we should check using tutorial repository. There is a method called exist by ID. If that ID exists in the tutorial table, using tutorial repository we can delete by ID. Otherwise, and if it does not exist, so no, this we'll do it with detail. When we try to delete a particular tutorial, first we'll delete in the detail. So I'll just comment this out. I'll write this part again when we will finish for tutorial details table. Right now I'm simply deleting by the ID. Once we delete part, all I will do is return 204 no content. This is last is what is being published and what is not being published. So for that I will just write one last method in the tutorial controller class with get mapping tutorials, and I will just pass this flag called published just to see the list if somebody wants to check. So when somebody wants to check they can get a list of tutorial back. The name of a method is find by published. So first, and that tutorial repository has got that method find by published and will pass true only. Now this returns the list of tutorials. Object name, if we'll get it. What if we don't, this list is empty? In that case we should print no content 204, and if the list is data is there, then we will return 200 with the list, with this list. Right, so all our HTTP endpoints are completed. I'll stop and I'll show you. We'll see whether they are actually working fine or not. If there is any problem with any HTTP endpoint, the operations won't work, and if things don't work here, whenever somebody writes the code for front end using React or Angular, that time also these endpoints will never work. Right, so posting is done. I'll try to add one is by published feature true. I'll make 3-4 entries in the database so that we have enough to fetch, enough to see whether the endpoints are working fine or not. Oh, did I run the install? If the database is up and running, yeah, the database is up and running. As of now we have got only one record in the tutorial table. As of now we have got only one record in the tutorial table. I'll just make 2-3 more entries. So Hibernate 1-to-1 unidirectional mapping, I'll just make 2 here with true, and description also. Actually title then will give everything, so I'll have to change it. So here I am changing it, otherwise everything will be returned. So I'm going to name it as, let's say, Hibernate. Without Hibernate the table mapping cannot happen. So tables mapping using Hibernate, and rest I will delete it. This is true, so posting is working. My system becomes a little slow, so posting is working fine. So again I'll put 3 here, and to 3 we'll make the published flag to false. This is, this is send. So now I have got 3 entries in the database. I can check that we have got 3 entries, 2 published true and 1 published 0. 0 means false, 1 means true. Now we will check other endpoints. We have just checked the, so now I'll check get all. To check get all I will do is change this to get, and I will now get all 3 IDs back. ID1, ID2, ID3. So get all is also working fine. If I give only 3 here, path variable, I used path variable, so slash will work. This is path variable ID, and if I want, I could give the title also. So only 3 comes. And if I give title using request mapping, request param, so if title contains table, right, then this 2 and 3 comes. So this is also working fine. Find by title containing, request param, all that is working fine. And now I'll show you put mapping, update. So I'll just give a new record. Let's say here I give 3, so 3, and I will change from get to put, and here I'm going to write 4, and output is this 4. Then it should update to 4, and in the database, right, so this is also working fine. And if I want published flag, if I want published flag, this published, then it will only give which is published true, so third will not come up. So get only published true will come up. Only 1 and 2 has come up, 3 did not come up. Similarly, if I want to delete the third one, I'll just say 204, third one is gone. I can check from the database, and if I say delete all, everything will be deleted. Now the entire tutorial table is empty. I could check by get also. I could check it via get also, or I could first show you the database. Everything is deleted. It's empty table, right? Ravi will connect tomorrow and I'll show you tutorial details table, and then we'll write the endpoints for that.